and welcome back to Without a Doubt, the podcast. I'm your host, Mad, a cycle breaker, entrepreneur, and a sprinkle of reality. This podcast is a place where we celebrate living life authentically and organically as ourselves. We're the ones breaking cycles, making waves, and living out their truest versions of who we are meant to be. This podcast is dedicated to those who want to break cycles, the authentic life makers, and those humans who just want more out of this one lifetime. This has been a passion project of mine, honestly, because I spend my own money on this every single week to host it because I'm not yet sponsored, but this is my project to the world. I was almost going to say I was embarrassed by these stats and I didn't want to share them, but it's been a whole year since I've done my very first episode. On average, most of these episodes get about 20-ish listens now. In the beginning, it was way more, but it's dropped off. My loyal listeners are still here, and my podcast would not be where it is without you. On the main stage of podcasting, I'm a tiny itty-bitty show with just over 1,500 downloads and now 52 episodes. And maybe a year ago, I would have thought, man, that really sucked. But this is a consistent number. Every single week, I have 20 people listening in, and that is a solid foundation. That's thanks to you. You, my loyal listeners that are still here. You keep coming back for more. You keep following along. And you allow this podcast to be part of your weekly routine. I am beyond grateful. Some mornings I wake up and there's 5 downloads before I even get to my computer in the first hour. And that makes my heart swell. 5 people, that's like ants to some people, but to me it's like 5 elephants. Imagine 5 ants in a room compared to 5 elephants in a room. No, I'm not calling you an elephant. It's just for size measure. I'm still not sure what this podcast will actually lead me into, but it has led me into completing 1 year of podcasting. It's been a year of growth. I've cut off some dead weight. I started therapy. I was diagnosed with depression and I'm working my way through in and out of it. I got back on my physical well-being grind and I've laid down some ideas on where I really want to go in life. I've kind of solidified some of my life plans. This podcast in a year has redefined itself as a podcast for cycle breakers because I've realized that's really what I am. That took me almost 6 months to figure out. And I didn't come into this podcast like, yeah, I know what the fuck I want to talk about or what I'm going to do because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I did, without a doubt, know that I have an idea and I have plenty more to say and a ton of value I could give, just even if it's to one person. And I know I have done that. The coolest thing for me, though, is the connections this podcast has built. I've made some new friends online and in my local area. I've grown a little community of humans who want more for themselves and want that authentic life. And even cooler, this podcast is worldwide, literally, played in over 10 countries. That is so cool. When you think you're not able to touch people outside of your region, don't be fooled. The world is watching and the world is waiting for you to shine. A few things I've learned is you can't do everything on your own. I'm the queen of not asking for help. I try to figure out everything on my own, but it's really frustrating at times. I am too working on this at therapy, but I needed a little bit of help to get this actual podcast out. The technical stuff, the writing, the ideas I bounce off Kendra constantly, my partners, my close friends, the listeners, I could not have done this alone. It is a lonely fucking journey. It is very hard. It is very quiet on this side of the microphone, even though I talk a lot. I rarely hear the claps for this podcast, and I think that's normal when you're a small podcaster. The messages that are sent, though, the emails, the IG comments, these are the things that are collaborative effort that keep me afloat. Also, sometimes working in silence is actually the golden move. Why? Because haters, family, and those people who love yucking on your yum. If you have a big idea, you have a fire in your belly, the sparks in your brain, just do it. Your gut is telling you something. It's that intuition driving you. But watch who you confide in. Not everybody's going to have your best interests. Some people just won't get it. They can't comprehend your ideas, your drive, or they just don't get you, period. It doesn't mean they don't want the best for you. They just don't understand. Sadly, most of my friends don't really even listen to this podcast. And I know that because they ask me about it. And then they tell me, oh, you should talk about this on your podcast. But I already have a podcast episode about that. Sometimes my friends will comment on my reels and I do know they support. But recently I was in a coffee chat with one of my close friends and she was astonished when I mentioned to her that some of my other closer friends don't actually listen to this. I don't really take it to heart on who does or who doesn't listen because this isn't for everyone, and that is okay. Some people will listen when they're ready. Some people will listen when they have the time, and some people will never listen, and that's on them. They don't owe me anything, but I do think that sometimes being a supportive friend includes listening to a 10-minute episode every once in a while, especially when I link it on my IG story and you're on your phone 24/7, but you do you, boo. I ain't judging. I'm just making a comment. Going back to this isn't for everyone, that's another thing I've learned, and I'm adding that to my back pocket. At first, I was like, yes, for all people, this podcast is for everyone and anyone who wants to live an authentic life, but most people don't. A lot of the people want to fit in, you want to be on trend, and a lot of people like to live in the social norms. It is easier there. I do too like some of that, but I don't find happiness in doing things that are for everybody. That's why I honed in on the people who are changing patterns, recognizing them, or just attempting to not drift with the current. Hello, that's you, cycle breaker. And also, this is more geared towards women. Granted, I'm not the girliest girl, but I am a badass woman. I'm a strong-spoken, big-hearted woman. I will share what I can and what I want, and I want to bring fierceness to other women. And those of you guys taking risks, being different, and reminding you that you are without a doubt a badass. Some people will follow, some people won't. Some will have more resistance, and then some will blow in here like a feather. Not everything is for everyone. And lastly, you would be so surprised in what you could learn in a year if you just sat down and even did the work. In less than 18 months, I have learned the basics of Adobe Premiere, which is not easy to learn. It's kind of like Chinese. It's like so strange, like being American and English and then learning Chinese or something like that. It's a whole nother language. I had 2 different people, amazing people, help me and gave me tips and tricks, and they were just so patient and wouldn't let me get frustrated with the tech stuff. That is the stuff that made me want to quit. I literally cried over Adobe Premiere. So thank you, Emily and Lonnie. Like, seriously. I also really need to thank my best friend Ivis for giving me her MacBook Air so I could solely have a computer for my podcast. Your love and friendship to me is undeniable, and we ride till the end, girl. I've also learned how to host a podcast. I've gotten more efficient in my editing skills, and I started trying new things. If you never thought you could be on an Apple Podcast or Spotify, hey, I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. So if you're a musician, you want a podcast, you got something to say, go do it. It's out there. Podcasting isn't easy. The weekly episodes, the topic burnout, the work behind putting this out. Some would say, is this even worth it to you, Mads? Why put something out that only 17 people listen to every week? Why do something when you're not making money doing it? Why keep doing something when it feels hard, tough, and frustrating? It's because I truly feel like these episodes make a difference, even if that's to one person. Sometimes I listen to these when I'm at the gym, and sometimes it's what I need to hear. So maybe this podcast was for me. Ha, what the fuck did you know? This podcast was for me because I know there are other people like me out there, and I want to remind you that you're not alone, that breaking cycles is hard, that trailblazing is scary, and being alone doesn't have to feel so lonely. Like I said before, I'm not really sure where this podcast is going or where it really will go. Initially, I had just said a year, and then I was going to take a little break and come back maybe with like an episode bi-weekly. I was literally set on taking a break. Like, let me get a little mojo in the tank and get a little new solid content out, get ahead of the game. But then I realized I really couldn't leave you hanging like that. 1 year later, this season comes to a close. And all that means is a brand new season is coming up hot and fresh. Coming up next season, next week, next Wednesday, more guest episodes, more real talk, and more reminders about why you have to keep making waves, breaking cycles, and being you. You only die one time in this life, by the way, so you've got to live every single day. You're without a doubt a badass. Don't you forget it. I will see you next week. XOXO. All the kisses, your girl Mad. See ya.